friends, how's it going? It's me, Betty Jean. So today finally is the video where I kind of compare my blue-green palettes. You guys have been asking for this for a while, and I just wanted to wait until I had the Whale Song to compare because I just wanted to have my full knowledge. I've already played with the Whale Song 4 times now. That video, my 3 looks 1 palette and first impressions, is already up. But the main focus of this video is on the Certifeye Affinity 2, which looks like this, the Beaute Oceanic palette, which looks like this, and with the Whale Song palette from Menagerie, which looks like this. I'm a mess. I also have a few other palettes just to compare potential shades if there are dupes. Like I have the Jaclyn Hill Dark Magic. I had somebody ask for comparisons with that one. The Exotic Peacock from Pinky Rose because it has some blues and greens. The Blue Blood from Jeffree Star. The Juicy Olive from Give Me Glow Cosmetics, and finally the Just My Luck from Colourpop. I do not own the blue one from Colourpop, so do not ask me to compare that one because I don't have it. I don't plan on getting it because I don't need it. But those are the palettes that I have that are blue-green based, and I'm going to compare them. My idea is just kind of going to be to take these palettes one at a time, like maybe I'll just start with the Menagerie, and I'm just going to go through on my own and compare each of these shades, see if I can find a dupe, and if I have a dupe, I will show it to you on camera one at a time, like that, because there's no sense in me swatching every single shade from every single palette because that's just going to be too much, too jumbled. So what I'd rather do is just kind of go through each of these individually off camera, figure out one by one if there is a dupe between any of these, and then I will get back on camera and show you swatches comparing the things, because I think that's going to be more helpful than me just swatching 10 palettes on my arm. That's not going to mean anything. So I will do that for all of the Menagerie. For any of the Certifeye ones that didn't get duped from the Menagerie, I will go over that one, and then I'll do the same with the Beaute Oceanic. I'm not going to do it individually for all those other palettes because that's not the point of this video. The whole point of this video is my blue-green palettes, which are these 3. These are the ones that are focused on blue-green color schemes. Okay, so very long-winded. This is going to be very informative. I can't speak. I don't know how long it's going to be. It could be short, it could be long. It just depends on how many dupes there are. I will only show it if it's even remotely close. If it's not even in the same kind of vibe to me, I'm not going to show it to you. So don't ask me in the comments, why didn't you compare this shade with this shade? It'll just be because I did not think that they were worth showing because they weren't close enough matches. Simple as that. But regardless, I hope this is helpful for you if you are trying to make a decision on what to buy. And at the very end, I will try my best to rank these 3 from most favorite to least favorite. It's going to be really hard though because I adore them so much, but I will try to pick a #1 favorite for you guys. Alright, so I'm going to figure out some swatches and we will move on to figuring all that out. Next shade is Plankton from the Whale Song palette, and I compared that with Seaweed from the Beaute Oceanic palette. That one looks like this. They are not exactly the same at all, but they are the closest out of all of these. This one's a lot more of like a tan based green. This one's slightly more olivey. So next up we have Barnacle from the Whale Song palette, and with that I compared Barnacles right here. This one is Power from the Blue Blood palette from Jeffree Star, and this one is Busted from the Morphe Dark Magic palette. Again, not exactly the same, but the closest out of the collections. So next I'm taking the shade Cetacean here, and I compared that with a couple things. Cetacean is this one on my arm. This one here is Blue Blood from Jeffree Star. It's definitely pretty darn close. And then these 2 aren't exactly the same, but I still wanted to include them. They are 2 of the shades from the Certifeye Affinity 2 palette. I will show that to you right here because I don't want to try to pronounce and butcher these names, but it's these 2. I felt like they were close-ish, so I still wanted to include them for comparison reasons. So now we're taking the shade Fluke, and I have a couple comparisons for this as well. This one is Fluke here. This one in the middle is a shade from the Affinity 2 palette that I'll show you in a second. This one is Mykonos, if I'm saying that correctly. Mykonos? Mykonos, that's how you say it. From the Beaute Oceanic palette, and this one down here is Provocative from the Pinky Rose Exotic Peacock palette. None of them are exactly the same, but I mean, on the eyes, a shimmery green is going to look like a shimmery green. And just so you know which Affinity 2 shade I was talking about, this is the green that I was talking about. And then from Beaute, this is the green that I was referring to as well. Next up, we have the shade Reef here, and I have a lot of comparisons for this one. This one is Reef. 2 of these right here are from the Affinity 2 palette that I will show you. This one is the shade Turtle from the Oceanic palette. This one over here is Mobamba from the Just My Luck palette from Colourpop, and this one down here is called Discreet, I believe. Yes, that's Discreet from Pinky Rose Cosmetics. From the Affinity 2, I paired this one right here with this one down here. And also from the Oceanic, Turtle looks like this, because those are the most important ones. Nothing is exactly the same. However, I will say Turtle is pretty close to Reef. Those are the closest for sure. This next one I wanted to do together. I did Bubble Net and Breaching together just because, I mean, I just felt like it. But this one is Breaching, this is Bubble Net. With Bubble Net, I compared the Blue Blood palette from Jeffree Star, the shade Cremated. Cremated is also up here. And also this is Undertaker from the Blue Blood palette, which is pretty close to Breaching, but it's not exactly the same. And then this one over here, I picked Pacific from the Oceanic palette, which it's not really the same, but it's the closest out of those three that we're really focusing on. Finally, the bottom row, we're on the shade Kelp now. That shade is right here. This second one is from the Affinity 2 palette. I'll hold it up. This one here is also Seaweed from the Oceanic. I compared both of these to a shade earlier in this video. And then both of these are shades from the Give Me Glow Juicy Olive palette. This one is Dry Martini, and then this one is Vodka-tini. From the Affinity 2 palette, the one that I compared is this one right here in the middle. And then Seaweed from the Ace Beaute palette looks like this. The closest ones are honestly the ones from the Give Me Glow palette, but I mean, they're all a similar vibe. They're just not exactly the same. I feel like Dry Martini is the closest. So now we are on the shade Dive, and with that I just compared one other shadow. It's one from the Affinity 2 palette, and it's pretty darn close, if I'm being honest with you. Might not be 100% exact, but I'm sure blended out on the eyes they would do pretty much the same thing. It is the second one here in the Affinity 2 palette. Alright, we are on the last two shades in the Whale Song. I did Splash and Whale Song together because Splash honestly didn't really have anything. Splash is right here, and I just compared that to So So from the Just My Luck palette, and it's not really exactly the same. It's a totally different shade of green, but it's the closest thing I had. And down here we have Whale Song from the Menagerie palette. This one right here is Marina from Ace Beaute, and then this one is Bay from Ace Beaute. This one over here is from the Affinity 2 palette, and then this one way over here is called, what are you called? Entitled from the Jeffree Star Blue Blood palette. The closest ones are definitely those first two, but they're not exactly the same. They definitely have a different tone. This second one's a lot more deep. And just to show you which shades I was swatching, the Affinity 2 palette one that I used is this one right here. And then from Ace Beaute, it was these two right here, just so you know. So we're done with the Whale Song palette. Now we're gonna move on to the, I guess we'll do the Affinity 2 next. And I'm going to be skipping around a bit because we already talked about some of these shades currently, unless I feel like there is a very clear dupe within other palettes that I didn't mention before. Alright, so with this palette I'm starting first with this shade because we already covered these shades before. But with this shade I had a couple comparisons actually. That one is right here. The second one next to it is called Blue Clam from the Oceanic palette, and they are pretty darn similar. There is not much difference between those two. And then over here from the Pinky Rose Cosmetics palette I have Truth and Dreams. Dreams is also pretty close, but it's also a little bit deeper. But that's where we're at so far. Okay, so next I skipped these two shades because honestly nothing out of all of these comes close to these. This is a beautiful like bluey, purpley, silvery duochrome. Look how stained my hands are. And then that purple, it's just not really prevalent in any of these palettes. So I moved right along to this darker blue here. And I went ahead and just compared that with Lagoon from Ace Beaute in the Oceanic palette. And it's not really similar. From far away maybe a little bit, but in real life this one's more blue, this one's more purpley blue. And I also took the liberty of taking the shade Kelp again from the Whale Song palette because I realized Potion, which is this one here, from the Jaclyn Hill Morphe Dark Magic palette might have been similar, but they're not really that similar anyways. But it's there just for your information. Moving on now to this green right here in the middle. I just compared that to one shade, and that was Seagrass from the Oceanic palette. They're pretty similar, but Seagrass is a little bit lighter. And just so you guys know, Seagrass is this one, and then in the swatch before this one was Lagoon, just so you're aware. Moving on now to this shade right here from the Affinity 2, I compared that with two shades from the Oceanic palette. This one right here is Lagoon again, and then this one over here is Blue Clam. It's actually pretty similar to Blue Lagoon, if I'm being honest with you. It's not too far off. And just so you can see them, Lagoon is this one and Blue Clam is this one. So now we're on this one down here. It's kind of a turquoisey green color. I'm comparing that one to Act Natural from the Just My Luck palette, and this one is Discreet from the Pinky Rose Exotic Peacock palette. And these two are pretty similar, but they're not exactly the same either. You know, that's kind of the theme with this. A lot of these are similar, but not exactly the same. So this next one I'm doing 3 in a row. I'm doing this green, and then this green, because they're all kind of similar to themselves anyway, so I wanted to just go ahead and get some comparisons out of the way. So this is that first one I said, the more neon one, then that's the second one, and then that's the more turquoisey one. And with this one I compared Algae from the Oceanic palette. This one here is Seagrass from the Oceanic palette, and this one down here is Fiji from the Oceanic palette. Those three are all here, Algae, Seagrass, and Fiji. And honestly, they're all pretty similar, especially like these two here and these two here. Not too far. So this next one is going to be the last one from Certifeye, just because simply these two do not compare to anything else. They're very unique. This one's a really cool, just a really cool, unique greenish duochrome kind of color, and then this one's a really pretty white-blue duochrome. But we're going to talk about this one down here really quick. And honestly, the comparisons aren't that great. It's right here. I compared that to Turtle from the Oceanic palette, and then this one is Dirty Martini from Give Me Glow. None of these are even remotely the same. I probably could have skipped this one as well, but here we are. That's the end of the Affinity 2. Now I know I've touched on a lot of the ones in the Oceanic, but I will kind of go through and figure out what I didn't talk about so I can give you some comparisons, and then we'll finish this video up. We're getting through it. So I realized the only ones we haven't touched on yet in the Oceanic palette are Bora Bora, Jellyfish, and Anemone. And honestly, Bora Bora doesn't compare to anything. It's very unique. It's a very cool color. I also didn't really touch on Bali, but looking at it, Bali doesn't really look like any of these. Bali's a really cool, like, powder blue kind of color. It's a very unique shade, even next to Cetacean. It's totally different. But I did want to compare Anemone and Jellyfish, those two kind of greeny gold colors, and I have a decent amount of comparisons. So this one up here is Jellyfish. It's a really cool greeny shifty gold, and then Anemone is just a gorgeous gold. This one down here is Erotic from the Pinky Rose Exotic Peacock. These two are from the Just My Luck palette. This one is called All of You, and then this one is Mary Jane. And then these two that are sideways are from Give Me Glow. This one up here is Garnish, and this one down here is Shaken Not Stirred. A decent amount of comparisons, but I don't feel like anything is exactly the same. Maybe Garnish is pretty similar to Anemone, but not, I mean, they're golds. They're only gonna look so different on the lid, but you know, they're totally different palettes, totally different color schemes. One's basically a dirty green palette and the other one's a blue-green palette that's very ocean themed. Okay, so those were all of my swatches. I really hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot of information kind of thrown at you, but I feel like the common theme is that none of these really totally duped themselves out. I feel like the most comparisons out of all of these were between the Affinity 2 and the Oceanic. These ones had a lot of similarities, but again, not necessarily exact dupes either. I think only a couple shades were like spot on dupes. There's a few similarities between my other various palettes that have blues and greens, but not so much so that I feel... bottom line is I don't feel bad about having all these now. I didn't really feel bad in the beginning, but I started to feel a little guilty, but I feel like I have such a good variety and it's really cool. Now, let's rank these three palettes, shall we? Oh, it's really hard. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and skip to number 1 because I felt like I knew in my heart of hearts what number 1 was before I even started this video. But after especially swatching these, I'm 100% sure now. My number 1 favorite is the Whale Song. It's such a cool, unique color story. I really appreciate that I didn't really have dupes for a lot of these shades, and it was just so fun to work with. I love the formula. I had so much fun. That's what I'm wearing on my eyes today. It's just... it was a blast to play with, and I'm so happy that that's my number 1. Between the Certifeye and Affinity 2, I love both. It's really hard to pick between the two. I truly don't know if I can pick because I love both of them. I can't pick. These ones are tied for second. I'm sorry. I can't rank them any more than that. I gave you a number 1 favorite, and that's the best you're gonna get from me. Whew, regardless, this was a very information-packed video. I hope you liked it. I hope it wasn't super boring. If you made it to the end, leave me an ocean-themed emoji. I don't care what it is, just some kind of ocean emoji. If you have any questions on things that I didn't touch on in this video, please leave them down below. Don't ask me for more comparisons between any of these shades because, like I said in the beginning, I truly just believe that certain things just didn't go together, and that's why I might not have compared them if you think I should have. But bottom line is, if you want one of these palettes, or 2 of these palettes, or 3 of these palettes, and you can afford them, then get them. Don't feel bad about it. You don't have to talk yourself into it or out of it or anything like that. I feel like they all have enough differences that it's not that big of a deal if you wanted all 3. But if you want to be a smart consumer and only get one, hopefully this does help you kind of narrow your decision down a little bit more. If you enjoyed this comparing my blue-green palettes video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please hop over to my Instagram and follow me there. It's beautbean. I post every single day, and don't forget to subscribe here before you leave. I post almost every day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, bye.